in bhakti. And so now I'm going to tell you my story. I just read this verse 2 days ago. Yesterday. Gopakumar in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita is preaching to one Brahmana, and he decides to tell him his own life story. And he says the reason he's going to do it is because of all forms of evidence for establishing the truth, experience from one's own life is the strongest. Thus, when Gopakumar frankly reveals the events of his life, that Brahmana will be persuaded to the higher truth that Gopakumar has grasped. Now we're back to the beginning again. Remember when I said Shastra is a crutch? Shastra is a crutch. So I started with Shastra. That's easy for me because I studied Shastra. I can make a compelling case. Then in the middle I used some logic. That was my explanation of bhakti. I didn't use Shastra for that. I just used some logic. I tried to explain bhakti in a logical way, not depending on the crutch of Shastra, but depending on some tattva vichar, some logic, some way of explaining things that made sense, that was reasonable. And now I'm going to tell my own story. Of course, I don't want to tell my own story because now I have no crutch. I also don't want to be a cheater. I can only tell you what I've grasped. I can only tell you what's mine. I can't pretend, otherwise now I'm a cheater. I don't want to do that. I wouldn't want to cheat the Vaishnavas. So I can just tell you my own story for what it's worth. Krishnadas Kaviraj tells us his own story in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because if he doesn't tell us his own story, no one will believe it. It's too wonderful. If Gopakumar doesn't tell us his own story, nobody will believe it. Radhanath Maharaj told his own story. Because it's so beautiful. Everybody found themselves in that story. So many thousands of people found their own life in that story. Because what he went through was universal. He became an everyman. Everybody could relate to it. So anyway. When I was 15 years old, I'm 41 now. When I was 15 years old, I made friends with some devotees. And I moved out of my house when I was 15. I'm from a well-to-do family. I moved out of my house, lived on my own when I was 15 years old. It might even have been 14, definitely by 15. I moved back in at some point. And I had these friends, they were about 10 years older than me. And they were kind of big businessmen. And what they did for business I won't mention, but they were kind of big businessmen. And I looked up to them. I thought they were very cool. And I wanted to be just like them. And they were vegetarian. So I was raised eating beef. I'm not ashamed of that. Of course, I wish it had not been the case, but at this point, I'm happy that I am where I am now, and I don't have so many regrets. And we'll come back to that in a second. Yeah, I thought these people were cool, and so I started copying them. And so they were vegetarian. I became vegetarian, and they went to the Hare Krishna temple. So I went with them. And my first day I came in the Hare Krishna temple, some brahmachari was there, and he told me I should practice celibacy. Which I think is kind of an unusual opening gambit for somebody. I think it's an unusual kind of opening line to lay on somebody. That was the first thing he said to me. He got married shortly thereafter, which is telling. And I ate some pakoras. And I thought, I did not like them. I don't know, man. I didn't like them. And the devotees were a little weird, a little strange. I wasn't so into it. But I liked my friends. I liked my friends. And so because of them, I kept coming. Now, at that point, I would stop taking all dairy products unless they came from protected cows, and nobody was protecting cows. This was in 1988, 89. Yeah. And so I used to bring my own prasad to the temple. I would bring a pot of sabji and rice, and I would put it on the altar, like right at the front, and I would offer it, and I would sit with the Vaishnavas while they ate the Sunday feast prasad, and I would eat that prasad that I had cooked. Because I just loved being with them so much, but I didn't think it was right for them to drink milk from animals that were slaughtered. I didn't think that was proper. I was 16, 17. I started chanting japa. I had the Bhagavad Gita, and it was given to me, and I put it next to my bed. I had some little talismans from various spiritual traditions, and I put the Gita there with that. I tried to read it, but I got caught up on all the names at the first chapter. For like 2 years, I couldn't read the Gita. From 15 to 17, I couldn't read it. I tried 100 times. Duryodhan and Satyaki. And I hadn't read Amar Chitra Katha growing up, so I didn't know any of these people. I hadn't watched the Ramayana or the Mahabharata video, so I didn't know all these people. Then when I finally made my way through the first chapter of the Gita, I thought, oh, Krishna's into war and Arjuna's into peace. Arjuna's going to convert Krishna. I actually thought that. That shows you how I had no background. And when I saw Narasimha and Hiranyakashipu, I thought, why is Krishna so ugly in this picture? He's fighting against this big demon, but he isn't his normal blue color? You know? Because Hiranyakashipu, I was used to seeing Krishna in human form, so I didn't know Narasimha was Krishna. I thought Hiranyakashipu was Krishna. I thought this artist is not very good. Then when I saw that picture of Gopal sitting on the rock, that real beautiful picture, it's an old kind of Brijbasi print that ISKCON did, it's its own way. I thought that was a girl. I was wondering, why do they have blue girls? What's with the blue girls at the temple? I came to the temple, I couldn't even see the deities. I just saw a bunch of color. I didn't know what was going on there. I just kind of, months I came. I didn't even know there were deities on the altar. Something was up there. But what happened was, I fell in love with the devotees. I read in the 13th chapter of the Gita about all the things which constitute knowledge in this world. Simplicity and humility and tolerance and compassion, kindness to all living beings, philosophical inquiry into the truth. And I thought to myself, nobody in the world has these qualities. That's what I thought. I was cynical at the age of 16 when I read that. No one in the world has these qualities. And then at some point I had a eureka moment, an epiphany, an aha moment where it all made sense. And I realized, wait a second. These people, the Hare Krishna devotees, they have these qualities more than anybody else I've ever met. And not just the Mahants, not just one or two sadhus, all of them have these qualities. Young and old, big and small, they've all got these qualities. And I'm dedicated to truth. And here I'm finding in these people more truth than I've ever seen anywhere else. And not just one person, but a whole community. It's Prabhupada's blessing that he created Vaishnavas. Prabhupada was so potent that he had to preach, and to preach you have to teach people to take Vaishnava association, but there were no Vaishnavas. So he made a bunch of Vaishnavas so we could get Vaishnava association. He was like a magician, a miracle worker. And that community of those Vaishnavas gave me faith. I thought, I want to do what they're doing. I want to be like them. I want what they have. I'm going to do what they do. So I started going to Mangalarti every day, at least 4 or 5 days a week. My first time at Mangalarti, I used to have a motorcycle. And India does not have good motorcycles. I've researched it. They don't have good motorcycles, not like the West. I'm sure in 10 years you'll have better motorcycles, but we had big motorcycles. I'm sure somewhere in Mumbai you can get, but at least like Vrindavan, Mayapur, Calcutta, you don't see them. But we had 750s and 1100s that could go, 300 kilometers an hour. Serious motorcycles. Serious motorcycles. And I used to race motorcycles as a kid. And we never wore helmets. There was no helmet law in California where I grew up. Oh, by the way, my parents used to take me to Westwood, which is where my dad was doing his graduate work at UCLA at the time, studying architecture. And they used to take me to Westwood. And they told me I would always make them stop when I was a little kid and watch the Harinam party. The Vaishnavas would go out on Harinam in the mid-70s, Prabhupada's disciples, huge busloads of them. And somehow as a little kid I liked watching them. I don't remember it, only from my parents I know. But at the age of 2, 3 years old I used to like watching them so much. So some Agyata Sukriti was there. Anyway, I left the Sunday feast and I put on my motorcycle boots to jump on my motorcycle to go home, and then I remember I'd forgotten to offer my obeisance to Prabhupada when I left the temple. So I ran back in to offer my obeisance to Prabhupada, ran all the way through the front of the temple. Prabhupada was up here, the doors are back there, so I ran all the way up in the middle of the Sunday feast and I realized I hadn't taken my boots off. Nobody said anything to me. I just jumped up and ran out mortified. And so I thought to myself, as my prayaschitta, I'll go to Mangalarti tomorrow. That was my first experience in Mangalarti. And I would cook prasad from the Higher Taste cookbook at my house. My parents, they'd meet. So I would clean the whole kitchen with vegetarian soap. And then I would wash the pots in a bathtub, in a restroom that we didn't use very often, because I didn't want to use their sink because their sponges were muchi. So I had a set of sponges and pots that I kept in my room and washed in the bathtub, and I would go and make prasad. After cleaning the kitchen, taking bath, putting on fresh cloth, and I'd go make prasad. Call it Brahminical tendencies or obsessive compulsive disorder. It's probably somewhere in between, but that's what I did as a kid. And my life went on like that. And I was so happy. And I was a center of a big group of friends. And they would all come to the temple with me. Because I would go, so they would come with me. And life was good. Life was great. And I was involved in some black market trading. We can leave it at that. As a kid, that was my business. And I was making at least $100,000 a year by the time I was 16 years old. And that was back in the 80s. That's a significant amount of money. And that's how much I'd save. I spent a bunch more, but that's what I would save per year. I was doing quite well for myself. Anyway, then Lokanath Maharaj came to town. My Diksha Guru, Sri Lokanath Maharaj. And he was the guru of those guys that I looked up to. They weren't initiated. They weren't initiated. They were 10 years older than me, but they were attached to him. They were attached to him. And so I just followed them. Okay, he's my guru too. It's okay to copy. It's not okay to follow like that for your whole life blindly. But as a child, that's what you do. Now my faith in my Guru Maharaj is my own. Now we have our own relationship, independent of those other individuals. Some of them fell away, some of them stayed. One of them, 5 years ago, 20 years after I got initiated, I performed his yajna for his initiation. And now he lives at our temple, and we work together. He was my Vartma Pradarshika Guru and my Shiksha Guru. He taught me how to chant japa, he taught me how to cook, he taught me how to offer food, everything he taught me. And then 20 years later, I had the good fortune of being his priest at his yajna. He was initiated, and he lives in our temple now, and we still serve together. Amazing, huh? What an amazing thing. So I was making all this money, and I was attached to making the money. I was chanting 16 rounds, going to Mangalarti 4 or 5 days a week, only eating prasad, and taking darshan at least every day at our temple. But I was attached to making this money. And then my Guru Maharaj came to town. And my friends had to drive him to Laguna Beach and to San Diego for programs for a few days. And so I said, okay, I'll come with you. I'll come with you. And so I jumped in the car and drove down with him and lived in the temple for a few days as we traveled and soaked in his association. And then he gave a class on karma, vikarma, and akarma from the 4th chapter of the Gita. And that class pierced my heart. And I vowed right then and there to give up my black market dealings. And then I went home, and I had an opportunity to make like $10,000 in one night in about half an hour. And I gave up my integrity. And went back on my commitment from that class. And then I had an opportunity to make tens of thousands of dollars in just a couple of weeks. So I told myself, I'll give half the money to the temple. It'll be okay, I'll just do this one more time. Then I'll give it up. And the day I made that decision, I was driving home from the temple, or driving home from the business activities after having visited the temple. And the front tire of my motorcycle blew out while I was going 80 miles an hour. And I flew over the handlebars and landed on my head. I was going to go to Mangalarti the next day. I chanted 16 rounds. I'd prepared nice prasad I was carrying with me in my jacket. I was going to go home, take nice snan, take a little prasad, take rest, and make it to Mangalarti the next day. And I was screaming home on my motorcycle, and my front tire blew out, and I flew over the handlebars. And time stopped. I was in the air for an eternity. Time stopped. And I was filled with this deep regret. This deep regret that I'd wasted my life. I'd been given some truth and I hadn't followed it. You understand? Something had been given to me and I had ignored it, and now the opportunity was gone because I was going to die. Something amazing happened. I didn't wear a helmet. I wore sunglasses when I drove my motorcycle because that's what cool people did. Only uncool people wore helmets. We would laugh at people who wore helmets. Now, in the 80s in California, there was no shortage of organ donors. But once they passed the helmet laws in the early 90s, it became more difficult to get organs donated in Southern California because so many people died from motorcycle accidents. But that day, on my way home, I saw out of the corner of my eye in a motorcycle shop a beautiful cobalt blue. It's like a very kind of bright blue color. Full-faced Kevlar racing helmet. It's a major racing helmet. And the cobalt blue color exactly matched the gas tank on my motorcycle. And it was just too good to pass up. So I went in and dropped $400 on this really fancy helmet, because that's the kind of thing I like to do in those days. And I couldn't tie the helmet to my... You can hook the helmet on your seat, but you can't do that when you're riding the bike because it unbalances the bike, so I had no choice but to wear it home. And I wasn't so into wearing it home. I wasn't into wearing it home because I thought it looked so stupid. I didn't want to wear it, but I had no choice because there's no other way for me to get home. So I was just going to take it home and put it on my shelf. And then if they ever passed the helmet laws, I would have a helmet to wear. The first time and the last time I ever wore a motorcycle helmet in my life. I landed on my head and I cracked the helmet in half. And 100% I would have died if I hadn't been wearing it. And there was nobody there. It was in the middle of a country road. I picked up my bike. I was covered in blood. When I went and knocked on the door of somebody's house, they thought I was like some kind of nightmare. They called an ambulance, and I was on my way to the hospital in a full state of shock, and I just said, "Okay, Krishna, you got me." I didn't listen. You're telling me again. I'll do it. Even then, I was still not pure. I'm not pure now, but I said, "Okay, Krishna, just make sure I'm not too injured, and then I'll join the temple." Because I'm on my way to the hospital. So I did a little bargaining there. Anyway, I broke my collarbone, and I got all tore up. I still have scars on my body from this accident. But I wasn't too injured. And I joined the temple. The rest is history. 2 days after I got out of the hospital, I went down to the Hare Krishna restaurant, the Govinda's restaurant in LA, tickled a prasad, and an acquaintance of mine came racing up on a motorcycle. Gurukul boy. And I said, "Hey man, be careful. Be careful. I just got in an accident." And he said, he did a big wheelie and sped off. And 2 hours later, he got hit by a car and died. Just 2 days after me. And I really saw that was me. That was where I was headed. Krishna kept me in his hand, helped me, gave me another choice. I wasn't listening. He spoke a little louder. And I joined the temple, and I'll finish with this. I remember praying, even before I went to the temple, "Please, God, show me the truth, and I promise you I'll follow you." I was so sincere, I even remember crying. "Please, God, show me the truth, and I promise you I'll follow it. Please just show me the truth." Have you guys ever prayed like that? I prayed like that. I don't pray like that anymore. I haven't prayed like that in decades. My prayer for the last couple decades has been, "Thank you, Krishna, so much for showing me the truth. Please forgive me for not following as nicely as I should. Please give me the strength to follow, keep my commitment to you that I made so many years ago. That if you showed me truth, I'd follow it. Please give me that blessing." Yeah, I can say I've made so many mistakes in my life, but I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to Krishna and the Vaishnavas. I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude. So I'll finish up with a little something, but I gave you some Shastra, the secret of the Gita, the essence of the Gita. I tried to present bhakti in some universal terms, in a logical way, in a reasonable way, that gave some information about what that bhakti being spoken of in the Gita was. And what I spoke, although logical, is also Shastric. I just didn't quote the Shastra. And I told you my own story, which is the story of someone coming to bhakti, interfacing with Krishna, having Krishna speak to them, teach them, help them, learning how to cry out. And so I tried to 1, 2, 3. And to wrap it all up, I can just say this. I come here to Chopati because for me this place is like Mayapur. Of course, where I live is also Mayapur. I live at the feet of Panchatattva in Laguna Beach. And that place for me is also Mayapur. But I come here because I feel so purified being with the Vaishnavas here. I feel so close to Krishna being with the Vaishnavas here. I see so much bhakti in them. And I feel uplifted by it. And just, my wife and I came here last year for the first time. Radhanath Maharaj has been telling me for decades to come here. We came for the first time last year. And just after 1 or 2 days here, we were sitting together and we said, you know what, if we went back home now and spent all that money just to come for these couple of days, that last kirtan we were in, that made it worth it. We came to a kirtan, and if we just got off the plane with 5 kids, we brought all 5 kids. If we got off the plane with all 5 kids and all the money it cost to come here, and all we did was attend that one kirtan, that's enough. That's sufficient. So I think this place is a tirtha. And I think all of you are wonderful Vaishnava, pure Vaishnavas, because I feel so close to Krishna in your association. And so that same magic that happened in my life so many years ago by the grace of the Vaishnavas in LA, I see that same magic happening here right now today with all these people coming to Krishna. And I'm sure that that's the magic which has been happening for all time. Forever. People have been coming to Krishna through the grace of the Vaishnavas. So all you saffron-clad sadhus, you have a great responsibility to be incredibly pure, to give a wonderful example to all the devotees, so that when they place their faith in you, it's not misplaced, so they don't become disappointed or despondent. All of you grihastas have a great responsibility to live an ideal life, so that those people who are coming can model their lives after yours. All you Madajis have to become very advanced, because being in a woman's body does not exempt you from becoming a pure devotee and inspiring others with both your words and your actions. And all of you guests have the opportunity of a lifetime. There's nothing more dear to me in this world than my relationship with Krishna and the Vaishnavas. I'm attached to my family like anything. I'm attached to my body like anything. I'm not willing to put them in front of my relationship with Krishna at this point. It's the dearest thing I have in my heart. I feel like I've been given a gift which is eternal, which the sands of time isn't going to wear away. And I'm just holding on to that with great hope, great confidence. Not because I'm special, but because Krishna is just that wonderful. As far as I can understand, that's bhakti. You get that sentiment, you beg it, borrow it, or steal it, you cultivate it, you hold it dear, you never let it go, you enshrine it on your heart, you do puja to it, and one day you make it your own. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Tukaram Prabhu, for that brilliant class. And we hope and pray that you keep coming here and inspiring and enlivening many of us. And there may be many who may have come on motorbikes today. So I'm sure this story will inspire many of those to start chanting Hare Krishna. So let us express our gratitude to Tukaram Prabhu by loudly chanting. Haribo, Haribo.